So as you can tell by now, I'm generally terrible. Ads, jeez. I'm generally terrible at reacting to stuff by being a day late and a dollar short. But a reaction here is about the controversy of the Game Awards indie dev, withdrawing his nomination because he says Megabonk is not his debut game. And it's for the best indie debut category, I believe. And I guess the reason why I wanted to react to this was because there is a more wider conversation about this that goes beyond just the idea of whether or not it was a honest action by the developer itself, which I don't have anything negative to say against the developer per se. But when you see what other games are in the category and what you, it'll make you probably think, probably a couple of the other studios should probably be moving on the same grounds then. Let's get the actual original response in this read here. So he says here, I believe it's a he, forgive me in advance, he's in trouble for that even now. I'm withdrawing from the Game Awards. It's an honor and a dream for Megabonk to be nominated for TGA, get you guys in a good view, which I don't think it qualifies for the category of debut indie game. I've made games in the past under different studio names, so Megabonk is not my debut game. And then it goes and say, I don't know if that's the before or after, doesn't feel right in this category, you should vote for another one of the amazing debut titles, they're all amazing games, thanks again, blah 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 blah. Okay, now if we check the other nominees here for this category, you'll see that we have a couple of options. Now I think Blueprints, I haven't done the research in terms of figuring out all of these studios if it's their first debut game as an indie. You couldn't really turn, it's not normally based on that. From my understanding, it's usually based on if it's the first indie game under that studio, but he's saying it's not his first indie game, hence he's removed himself from the nominations. So obviously Blueprints is a big one. I guess the biggest contentious one in here is probably Clear Obscure Expedition 33, which is pretty much gonna probably win everything. I think it cleaned up at the Joystick Awards, I think that's what it's called already. So people are expecting this to pretty much wipe the floor anyhow, so it's not going to make much of a difference. It probably wouldn't have won anyway, respectfully, or maybe it would have won, who knows. But the problem with Clear Obscure itself, we should hang in a little bit here, not too close though, is that it's one of those games that have been contentious as being considered an indie game in the first place, just because of the fact that there was a lot of contractors involved in the development, I believe. And I'm pretty sure that it's been a development that has been well over 100k. In fact, let's kind of substantiate some of these thoughts and guesses. So as we can see here, there's an estimate between 15 million and 25 million. Okay, just get that in your head here in terms of the idea of indie. Now, I've done a post about the idea of indie versus independent versus AAA a long time ago. You probably won't be able to find it. In fact, someone said they actually used it as a piece of their college or something like that, which is pretty cool. But I would never typically ever define an indie team as someone that's having $1 million budget of any kind, much less 15 million as an underestimate or a low estimate side of things. So bear in mind, this is a studio that's got a minimum of 15 million budget on their game, which bear in mind that games can these days be something like 200 million in their budgets. So it's not a large budget in the scheme of general game development, but as far as indie versus independent, which again is another argument, is kind of weird, right? It's like, okay, hold on a minute. I'm pretty sure that Megabonk, all due respect to it, didn't have a budget of $1 million, much less 15 to 30 million. Now, if we talk about team size as well, that's another aspect of what people factor into their definition of indie. So let's look at the team size. Now, again, this is going to differ between contractors versus core team. So 30 people, definitely not what is normally classed as an indie again. 30 core members. Now, if we also look at the background of the team itself, and again, this is not an attack on, you guys can't really see from this camera angle, it's not really an attack again on like the team itself or the game itself. This is more of an estimation of the idea of withdrawing based on a game not being your first debut game, right? So here we go here. So as I suspected, it was founded by former Ubisoft employee, largely comprised of ex-Ubisoft developers. So again, not an attack on them in any way or what have you, but I'm just saying semantics wise, you could argue that they probably shouldn't qualify for indie debut either. Now, if they can qualify for indie debut, then it really should come down to the studio experience as opposed to, or I should say the studio's releases under the name as opposed to the experience and the budget. Because if it's experience and budget and so forth, then this clearly wouldn't count, right? So I guess I would ask you guys is, what is your definition of indie? Because clearly that's a big factor in this whole thing. The only good thing about this page having all the ads on the side is it actually centers my damn split view. What would you guys define as indie? Would you define the Clear Obscura 33 studio, Expedition 33 studio as indie with a budget of 15 million minimally, as well as a team of 30 before I think you even add the contractors? Again, not an attack on them, But I'm just saying, it's kind of weird. I don't know if I would remove my game based on it not being my first indie game under a new studio, and literally, you know, there's a team of experienced Ubisoft X's there with 15 plus million budget on a game, compared to me that's probably never even seen a million at that point. So that's one of the arguments of it. What is exactly indie in the first place? And I think this is coming down to get into semantics, because is it based on what is the rule for that category? Is it based on it being your first game for that studio? Is it based on the first game you've ever released as an entity, as an individual, or as a limited company or a corporation? Is it based on budget? Is it based on team size? What is the criteria even? Is it just simply based on not being attached officially to a publisher? I don't know, but seems like a pointless removal of nomination really in comparison to what is already there. And the makeup of all those different studios, I bet, doesn't really probably fits in a similar way that they could withdraw themselves as well. But no big deal anyway, you know, it's good coverage for him. Makes good news, looks like a good guy, respectfully, and not a bad thing. So it doesn't hurt, especially if that's really what he believes. If it doesn't feel right, then that's the right thing to do. But I'm thinking a lot of other games and a lot of other categories could argue and do the same thing. And I guess for me, this is kind of the general problem with award shows in general. There's a controversy right now in the streaming world, which I don't know if you really even call it this a controversy, much as the streaming world one, but there's a whole thing with the so-called streamer awards. I'm always sounding like I'm being condescending. I'm not intending to be. But, you know, the streamer awards has got the controversy of the whole how people are getting voted. Are people not voted if they are controversial or have certain viewpoints and beliefs? Is it compromised by the person that runs the thing being connected to certain people or friends with certain people? Is certain votes or categories based on inclusion rather than best performing or most voted for, etc., etc.? Lots of problems. And, you know, in general, it's kind of proof that award shows are not only very subjective and very tribal and very mixed, but they're a thankless task. If you're going to do them, you can't really expect too much joy from them, because they're always going to have these so-called controversies where people disagree or can't agree on whether something should even be nominated, or the lack of nomination for something, the time frame and so forth. When it's not very clear what nominates you for a category, but also why someone wins, these kind of things happen in the first place. It's just a thankless task. You're never going to win with them, because they're always going to be subjective unless they're made on a very specific criteria, very specific system. You're always going to have the streamer awards controversies and accusations and so forth, you know, if you can't stand the heat and all that. Because I think really and truly the streamer awards is more pointless than the game awards, simply because streaming is such a subjective thing a lot of the times, and there's so much criteria you can go by, and it's not defined in the same way necessarily by sales, unless you go and buy, say, Twitch or something like that, which has a more open data thing going on, whereas other platforms, harder to know what's going on there to even define it purely by data. So it ends up being a very subjective thing, unless you're just going to let everybody vote for anybody, and then whoever wins is going to be the people who have the most following and who are pushing it the most to be voted in the first place. But I don't even know how that system works or how that thing is. That thing's always been way too cringy for me. I'm not into award shows in general. I think the Game Awards is the only one I watch, because the Game Awards at least has, or one of the few I only watch, at least has the pull of game premieres and world exclusives, world premiere of games upcoming, which is something disconnected from my computer shop is important, which is obviously of interest to any game, irrespective of whether you like award shows or not. It's also that game developers are not overexposed the way that your Hollywood people are, your actors and musicians, and even streamers. They are exposed all the time. They don't necessarily need another limelight to try and be like the Hollywood so-called former elite or what have you. They need to just calm down and enjoy the work and get on with things. So it seems like an award show is extremely pointless for them, to me, compared to the Game Awards. But what do you guys think? Do you think that the award shows are good? Do you think they're too subjective? Do you think they need a more defined system? Do you think streamer awards are pointless, especially in comparison to Game Awards? Do you think they both had their place and there's a way to make this work? Look forward to your comments. Watch the video on the screen. I'm sure it's there. And I'm going to remove myself from the nominations of the content awards, because I don't consider myself an indie debut. What can I say?